Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tipped Worker Regulations in New Jersey, What Employers Need to Know, brought to you by Domain Computer Services. I'm Kate Conroy, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. With us today are Christine Blumauer, Martha Diaz, and Michelle Simon with New Jersey's Department of Labor. A few housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you tomorrow along with the PowerPoint for today's presentation, so be on the lookout for those. If you just can't wait, you can download them right now from the Handouts tab, but I'd also like to draw your attention to the Questions tab. Our speakers would be happy to take your questions, so get them in as they come to you via the Questions chat box. One last thing, it's definitely been getting better, but we've still been noticing people having audio and visual issues with the GoToWebinar platform as they struggle to keep up with all the extra video conferencing going on right now. If you have any trouble viewing or hearing during this presentation, don't forget you will automatically be receiving a recording within 24 hours. So if you have to sign out and watch the recording, you won't miss a thing. So now, without further ado, Christine, take us away.
Thank you so much, Kate, for the kind introduction. And I would like to start by thanking New Jersey Business and Industry Association on behalf of the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development for having us today, giving us an opportunity to present on our new tipped work regulations here in the state of New Jersey. We're always eager to be proactive in reaching out to the business community and are always very grateful for the excellent relationships we have with NJBIA. So today's topic are what you need to know about tipped work in New Jersey. As Kate already announced, I am Christine Blumauer. I'm a policy advisor in the Commissioner's Office at DOL. And I'm joined today by Martha Diaz, who is an investigator in our Division of Wage and Hour Compliance, and Michelle Simon, who is a district supervisor with the Division of Wage and Hour Compliance. Most of you probably know the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development. We provide a variety of services across the board, from workforce development to labor standards compliance. And today, at the end of the slide deck, you will see a list of resources that we've compiled for you as businesses and employers, and we've geared them towards the current situation as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are a variety of new resources that are on this list that we will encourage you to consult, including our back to school guidance that will be very helpful for your employees. So here's the webinar overview. We will be addressing 4 buckets. The first one will be about minimum wage and tipped work. The second about tip ownership and tip pooling. The fourth about overtime and paid sick time. The third, and then the fourth about the 80-20 rule and dual occupations. We will start by a presentation. And then, as Kate already said, as your questions come to your mind, feel free to add them to the chat box, and we'll be happy to take them at the end of the presentation. And I will say, though, that we are in this place able to answer general questions about the regulations and our wage and hour laws. But if there are any case-specific or detailed questions that you have, we will happily arrange for you to ask us these questions separately after the webinar. Thank you. And now the floor is yours, Martha and Michelle.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As I was introduced by both Christine and Kate, my name is Martha Diaz. I'm an investigator with the Department of Labor, Division of Wage and Hour Compliance. The first issue that I will be discussing will be minimum wage. Next slide, please. Christine, next slide. Cash wages and maximum tip credit. You are permitted but not required to take a tip credit. In any case, your employees must receive at least a full state minimum wage. As of January 1st, 2020, the minimum wage is $11 an hour. If your employee is paid $3.13 an hour, the maximum tip credit that you as the employer can take is $7.87. Next screen, please. Cash wages and maximum tip credit. If the minimum cash wage plus the tips received by your employee do not equal at least the full state minimum hourly wage, then you must pay the employee the difference. Example, Pam is a waitress. She makes an average of $200 in tips per her 40-hour work week, or $5 an hour. Her hourly wage of $3.13 plus $5 an hour in tips equals $8.13, which is below the full state minimum hourly wage rate. You must pay Pam the difference of $2.87. That means $13 plus $5 plus $2.87 equals the minimum wage of $11. To ensure she receives at least a state minimum hourly wage rate. Next slide, please.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Simon. I'm a district supervisor in the Division of Wage and Hour Compliance. I'm going to talk about tip ownership and tip pooling. Christine, next slide, please. Oops, looks like I don't have the whole slide here. Okay, there we go. What is a tip? A tip is money given to an employee by a customer in recognition of a service performed for the customer. It's also made in addition to the amount charged for the service performed, and the customer decides if, to whom, and how much to tip. It can be a cash sum given directly to the employee, or it can be given by another transfer method, such as when a customer pays by credit card and adds an amount to their card for the tip. And remember, the tip always belongs to the employee, whether or not the employer has taken a tip credit. Next, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk about service charges. And so is a service charge a tip? If your establishment charges a compulsory service charge, such as 15% of the amount of the bill, this cannot be counted as a tip under the New Jersey law, even if you eventually distribute the charge to your employees. Examples of this would be amounts for distribution to the employees of your hotel for banquet facilities aren't counted as tips. If your restaurant assesses an additional charge for parties over a certain number of people, this is not considered a tip under the New Jersey law. Next slide, please. So, who is a tipped employee? A tipped employee is any worker, full-time, part-time, or temporary, engaged in an occupation in which they customarily and regularly receive more than $30 per month in tips. An employee who customarily and regularly receives more than $30 in tips over a 1-month period, but occasionally does not, is also considered a tipped employee. If an employee does not receive tips because they were out sick or on vacation, or because business was slow in a given week, they're still considered a tipped employee. Next slide, please.
Can I take deductions from tips, including to cover credit card fees? No. Tips are owned by your employees. You cannot deduct from tips, not even to cover credit card fees. The only time that you can deduct from your employees' tips is for purpose of a tip pool among tipped employees. In that instance, all tips received eventually get distributed to tipped employees. None of the sum remains with you as the employer. Next slide, please. The slide is not positioned. Can I take deductions from cash wages? New Jersey payment law contains a list of permissible wage deductions. Deductions from wages for payments authorized by the employee or their collective bargaining agent for rental of work clothing or for the laundering or dry cleaning of work clothing are authorized. The following deductions would be illegal: for cash register shortages, breakage, and dine and dash costs. There is one exception, and that's the maintenance and upkeep of uniforms by kitchen people, cooks, and dishwashers. That shall be provided and maintained by the employer. These are tipped employees. Next slide, please. Tip pooling occurs when tipped employees combine all or some of their tips and redistribute the sum among themselves. You must notify your employees of any required tip pool contribution amount. Only your tipped employees may participate in a tip pool. You may only take a tip credit for the amount of tips each employee ultimately receives. You may not keep any of the employees' tips for any other purpose. You may not distribute them to non-tipped employees. If you take a tip credit, once tips are retrieved from the pool and cash wages distributed, your employees must receive at least the full state minimum hourly wage. Next slide, please. The slide is not in the, thank you. Tips record keeping. You are required to maintain and preserve payroll or other records containing the total tips received by each of your tipped employees during a payroll week. Your employees are required to report their tips to you. You may choose to have them report these daily or weekly, and the employee report should include the following: the employee's name, address, and social security number, name and address of the employer, calendar day or week covered by the report, total amount of tips received. And just a little side hint, the IRS employees report on tips is acceptable if the report is made either on a weekly basis or less. Next slide, please.
Okay, we're going to talk about overtime rates and paid sick time, which is also known as earned sick leave. Next slide, please. So how is overtime calculated for tipped employees? Your tipped employees must receive 1.5 times their hourly rate of pay for any hours worked over 40 hours per week. You may not pay your employees less than the hourly cash rate of $3.13 per hour for the year 2020. In addition to the cash wage, you are required to pay employees at least the rate of half the applicable minimum hour wage. That's $11 per hour in the year 2020, divided by 2. It's $5.50 for all hours worked over 40 per week. Then add the $5.50 is added to the maximum allowable tip credit of $7.87 and the minimum wage of $3.13. Your employee would receive a total of $16.50 per hour for each hour of overtime worked. And you can also refer to the chart that Martha spoke about a little bit earlier, and it's also accessible on our website. If the tips earned when combined with the cash rate paid do not bring the employee's rate of pay up to the applicable minimum wage for the overtime, you may need to increase the hourly wage paid and decrease the tip credit taken. Next slide, please. So in 2020, here are a few examples. A tipped employee who works 44 hours in a week must receive, again, at least $16.50 an hour for the 4 hours overtime worked, or $60. And again, that's $11. The minimum wage rate times 1.5 times the 4 hours equals $66. So here are 2 different examples with 2 different cash wage rates. So let's start with the $3.13, all right, plus $5.50, which is half time. And so that's going to be a total of $8.63 times the 4 hours worked is a total of $34.52 due from the employer. You would have to show the $7.87 in tip credit times 4 equals the total of $31.48. When you add the $34.52 plus the $31.48, you get a total of the $66 due for overtime. So another example would be if the employer paid a higher cash rate of pay at $5 an hour plus the half time, which is $50, it equals $10.50. Times 4 equals $42 due from the employer. The employer would then have to show a tip credit of at least $6 in this instance, times 4 hours equals $24. When you add the 42 plus the 24, you get a total of $66 due for the overtime. Next slide, please. Are my tipped employees entitled to any paid sick time? Under the New Jersey Earned Sick Leave Law, almost all employees in the state of New Jersey are entitled up to 40 hours of paid leave to care for themselves or a loved one. When your tipped employee uses earned sick leave, you must pay them at least their normal rate of pay. You would calculate the rate of pay for earned sick leave by adding together the employee's total earnings, including the tips, excluding the overtime premium pay, for the 7 most recent work days. Where the above is not feasible to calculate, you would pay earned sick leave at the agreed upon hourly wage, but no less than the appropriate state minimum hourly wage. You may not take a tip credit during an employee's sick leave. Next slide, please.
80-20 rule and dual occupations. Next slide. What happens to the tip credit when one of my employees has 2 different jobs at my establishment and only one of them is tipped work? For the job which your employee customarily and regularly receives at least $30 per month in tips, you may take a tip credit. For the job in which your employee does not customarily and regularly receive at least $30 per month in tips, you may not take tip credit. Hint, separate these hours out in your accounting system for ease of tracking and reporting. Here's an example. Trina works as an accountant at your nail salon 20 hours a week. She also works as a nail stylist for another 20 hours a week and customarily and regularly receives more than $30 per month in tips in that latter job. You can only take a tip credit for the 20 hours she works as a nail stylist. For the remaining 20 hours a week of accounting work, you must pay Trina at least the appropriate state minimum hourly wage. Next slide. What happens to your employees' pay when they are not doing tipped work? Your tipped employee may spend some time performing non-tipped duties related to their tipped work. When your tipped employee spends more than 20% of their time performing related non-tipped duties, you cannot take a tip credit for their time spent performing the related non-tipped duties. That is, for the time spent performing related non-tipped duties, you must pay the full state minimum hourly wage. This is referred to as the 80-20 rule. Next slide, please. What happens to your employees' pay when they are not doing tipped work? This is an example. Santiago spends 30 hours styling hair and 10 hours preparing hair coloring mixtures and folding towels. You can apply a tip credit against the full state minimum hourly wage for the 30 hours of hairstyling, but not for the 10 hours spent on related non-tip duties, as those 10 hours of non-tip work account for 25% of Santiago's work. Another example, Desiree works as a waitress 30 hours per week. She spends 5 hours a week folding napkins and setting tables. you can take a tip credit against each of the 30 hours, as the 5 hours of non-tip work equal only 17% of her total work hours. Next, please. Okay, now we've come to our questions section of the presentation. If anybody has any questions, please feel free.
Hi, this is Kate again. We have 1 or 2 questions, so let's dig right in. Could you list again the examples of who qualifies as a tipped employee under New Jersey law?
So a tipped employee would be an employee who regularly and customarily receives more than $30 per month in tips.
Great. And what is the minimum cash wage rate in the year 2020 that an employer must pay a tipped employee if the employer is taking a tip credit?
Okay, so that's a great question. So for the year 2020, if you just reference our chart again, and it's going to be $3.13. And again, we encourage everyone to go to our website and print out the chart. We also have them accessible. We can have charts mailed to you for your convenience with your employees.
Great. I just want to remind everybody listening to feel free to send in a question if you have any. One last question that just arrived. What must the employee's tip records include in New Jersey?
Anyone take that one?
I'm sorry. I'll do it, Michelle. It's okay. In the state of New Jersey, employers' tip records must include the following: the employee's name, address, and social security number, the name and address of the employer, daily or weekly records, and the total amount of tips received.
Excellent. So that's actually all the questions that we have. Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. Please explain the OT calculation again. Why do you need to add the tip credit amount?
To make sure that, so basically you're going to have the $3.13 cash rate, and then you have to show, the employer has to show that they paid the halftime on the overtime. Okay, so the cash minimum wage is $11, and so thank you for the. Let's go back. It's a little bit easier. We can just go back to the slide for the overtime. Maybe I think it's slide 17. Yeah. So basically, nope, a little bit further. It might be slide 7. Christine. Okay, here we go. So basically you have the cash rate of $3.13, and remember the minimum wage is $11, and so the employer has to pay the halftime. So that would be $5.50 because you take the 11 divided by 2, and so the employer would pay the $3.13 plus the $5.50. So that would be the employer's portion, which is $8.63. However, the employer has to show a tip credit of at least $7.87 in this particular example to bring the work up to the total of $16.50 per hour. And again, if the cash rate changes, then the tip credit can also change. It fluctuates. So in the second example, it's $5 for the cash rate, and with a halftime of $5.50, and then the employer would have to show a cash rate of at least $6. And again, so for 2020, the maximum would be $7.87. So it's kind of adjusted, and it's just that the employer has to make sure that they pay the cash rate and the halftime, and then the tips brings it up to the 1.5 times hourly rate, which would be $16.50.
Excellent. Okay, it looks like that might actually be our last question. So unless you have any last thoughts, we will wrap up.
I just want to kind of add that, everyone can feel free to contact our division at any time. They can do it via the web or, by phone, and we're happy to answer any questions. And people can always, remain anonymous if they wish to, but we're here to, educate and ensure that everyone's in compliance and that the workers understand, the New Jersey wage and hour laws.
Perfect. Okay, don't forget, everyone will be receiving a recording of today's webinar and the PowerPoint slides via email. When you close out of the webinar, a survey will come up on your screen that we hope you will fill out so that we can best understand how to provide important information to you in webinar format. Our next webinar, Cash is King and Queen, How to Get It Faster, Track It, and Keep It, will take place tomorrow, October 8th at 11:30 a.m. So by all means, feel free to register for that at our website, njbia.org/webinars. And don't forget to check out Domain Computer Services for all your IT needs at godomain.com. So until next time, for Michelle Simon, Martha Diaz, and Christine Blumauer with New Jersey's Department of Labor, this is Kate Conroy thanking you for being with us today and wishing you a great day.
Thank you.